everyone. Welcome to VCTV, the Venture Capital TV from LATOKEN. So this is the platform, a VCTV platform is a platform to connect investors and startups and founders and entrepreneurs under one roof, as we all know. Very interestingly, this is the very last episode of VCTV for year 2020. I emphasize on that. We are back again in 2021 with new episodes, new look, new speakers, new topics. So this is the very last episode of VCTV Asia for the year 2020. And I'm very excited because we are closing on a very interesting topic about discussing about Bitcoin. Who doesn't know Bitcoin if you're in crypto? Even though you are not in crypto, if you are an institutional investor, still people know cryptocurrencies. Why? So you're going to know about that more from the speakers tonight on the panel. So the topic of the session is Bitcoin the digital gold? Why is Bitcoin called the digital gold? What is gold? What is money? We're going to go to the basics of money. We're going to go to the basics of Bitcoin. We're going to go to the basics of gold, as if we're going to explain our grandma what is Bitcoin. So let's drill down, let's sit back and have fun today. So before I start introducing my speakers, let me just introduce myself. Hi, everyone who's watching VCTV. My name is Sunny Mohanty. I'm the regional director of LATOKEN, and LATOKEN hosts VCTV every day, Monday to Friday. I host 8 p.m. Singapore time. So VCTV was born because of the pandemic we started this year. As we all know, because of the pandemic, we couldn't travel. We couldn't hold conferences. We couldn't meet people. We couldn't network. We couldn't close deals. That's when VCTV was born. And we moved very fast, very quickly in February this year to a digital platform. So it's the same concept, the same goal, the same objective of connecting people, networking, but digitally. So we digitally transformed ourselves, so as to speak. So digital transformation, my apologies, has been a buzzword as well this year, besides Bitcoin, being on the topic. So great, that's about VCTV, that's about me. So we have the speakers, we have 3 fantastic speakers, all going to talk about Bitcoin. First, I'd like to start with a very new speaker who's joined us for the very first time from Dubai, who is a big-time Bitcoin investor, Dustin. Hi, Dustin. Welcome to VCTV. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you very much.
Okay. I would like you to introduce yourself, your company, and a bit about Bitcoin investment that you've done over the years. Thank you. Over to you, Dustin.
All right. So in 2017, I started Danawi Group, and essentially we look to partner with different people on a wide variety of business ideas. We've done rooftop farming in Bangkok, Thailand. We have done education centers in China involving different English teachers. Lately, we got into real estate, and we're looking at doing some Airbnbs in Colorado at some of the ski resorts. And actually, early 2017, we got into Bitcoin. So we originally came in when it was right around $1,000 per Bitcoin. And we all know today, actually, we just hit the all-time high, 28,500, I believe. The last couple of years has been extremely exciting for Danawi Group and myself, and we're looking forward, especially to the next 4 years or about 10 years, really, the next decade, as the whole world kind of changes into this Bitcoin type of world.
Yeah, fantastic. I think Bitcoin stands somewhere between 26, 27K USD. Yeah, it's been hovering around that range. Thank you, Dustin, and welcome to VCTV Asia. Next, I have Julia from Hong Kong. Hi, Julia. Welcome back on VCTV. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Sunny. Yeah, this is a really interesting subject. I'm a lawyer. I've been advising on virtual assets, and it started with token offerings actually back in 2017 mainly, but we advise an awful lot now. We advise Bitcoin exchanges, virtual asset exchanges. There's quite exciting developments in Hong Kong at the moment that we have our first SFC licensed virtual asset exchange, which has just been authorized a few days ago. And I'm seeing huge interest. We set up Bitcoin funds, virtual asset funds, and a number of people we're advising are also seeking asset management approvals to be virtual asset managers. So I'm seeing massive interest, and I'm really looking forward to talking about what's going on in the narrative about Bitcoin, Ethereum, securities tokens offerings, and so on, which I can only see going from strength to strength next year.
Oh my God, Julia, I love that topic and appreciate you being on the panel today. And I'm really excited to know more from you as well. Next, I have Fabio. Fabio, welcome back to the last episode of VCTV for the year 2020.
I'm glad to be back, Sonny. It's always a pleasure to be with you on this show. And, the fact that it's the last of the 2020 is just a prelude to a much better 2021. That's what all we hope.
Absolutely. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm an economist by training. I have a PhD from the University of Chicago with thesis in finance. In my career, I worked both in public and private institutions. I started with the International Monetary Fund in Washington. Then I moved to the European Central Bank for the launch of the euro. Then I took the plunge and I joined the private sector, specifically Goldman Sachs in London. And then I started a career as manager, director in various institutions in the Middle East, in the Arabian Peninsula, ending with a stint of 8 years at the Oman Investment Fund, which is the sovereign wealth fund of the Sultanate. And then last year I decided to invest. I took a stake in an investment bank in New York, which is called Golden Eagle, and has branches in Dubai under the brand Amintad, and in Hong Kong. What I do now, I help startups, innovative companies in general, to list on the over-the-counter market in New York. We also have a fund, we're asset managers, we have a fund that takes positions in innovative companies, but in a pre-IPO phase or after, post-IPO phase. That's my job now.
Oh, Fabio, you've got a diverse portfolio of experience. Thank you so much for being on VCTV very, very regularly and sharing your insights, and really appreciate your presence today on the last episode of VCTV. Talking about Bitcoin, talking about asset management, institutional investors. So institutional investors are now more accepting cryptocurrencies as an investment class. Bitcoin, which is become the king of cryptocurrencies, is now becoming part of the mainstream. That's in the news, that we all know, we're in the crypto industry. But how would you educate, how would you explain Bitcoin to your grandma, for instance? How do you explain Bitcoin to your 5-year-old, for instance? I'm going to start with Dustin, who's been in the education sector and has got lots of experience in educating people. How do you explain Bitcoin to a 5-year-old, Dustin?
I think, first of all, a lot of times we try to jump into explaining what Bitcoin is. And sometimes it throws people for a loop, because it seems really new. It's all new, economic education. And you really just have to first start with the basics and say, what is money? And yes, generally most people, in this lifetime have dealt with paper, fiat currency, coins. We know historically it used to be spices and things as such, seashells and things like that. So you really start to say, like, what is money? And when you say, what is Bitcoin, it's literally just the evolution of money. And we have moved from the industrial era into the digital and the information era. We've seen, the post office become email. We've seen Blockbuster become Netflix. So really, Bitcoin is just the money for the internet. We're moving money onto the internet. And it's not something that an individual was ever allowed to legally print was money. It was always controlled by the governments. So explaining Bitcoin to a 5-year-old, I would literally just say, on a very simplistic manner, it's internet money. It's moving money onto the internet. Of course, there's a lot more background when you think there's actually been about 40 years of research and development technologically leading to Bitcoin. The US dollar has gone down 87% since 1957. So the US dollar, being the world reserve currency, has actually been on a massive decline. And you can look at other fiat currencies such as in Lebanon and Cyprus. We all know Zimbabwe, Venezuela, hyperinflation. So at a very simplistic manner, I would just simply say it's digitizing money. And historically, governments have failed to retain the value in their currencies because there was no cap. You could just print as much as you want. And in 2020, the US has printed 22% of all US dollars in 2020. So just knowing that statistic, you could say, I see why governments are failing to control the value of their currencies. Bitcoin has a hard cap, 21 million. So we know we're not going to look at hyperinflation with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Very rightly said, internet money. If you have to explain your 5-year-old or your grandma what's Bitcoin, it's the internet money. Thank you, Dustin, for that. Julia, over to you. The same question. Like, who's the father of Bitcoin or the mother of Bitcoin? Why was Bitcoin born, and what is Bitcoin? Over to you, Julia. Let's start defining it with the basics. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, perhaps I could also just take one step back and just explain what I think money is. Then we move on to the Bitcoin question. I think that what I would say to a 5-year-old is that here is 20 Hong Kong dollars. You could buy a bar of chocolate, but what is this piece of paper, this 20 Hong Kong dollars? And it is, what it says on it is, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation promises to pay the bearer on demand. So it's confidence in that bank, or it might be the Bank of England or the US Treasury or whoever issues the money. And in Hong Kong, this is actually backed by US dollars, which in an exchange fund, which the Hong Kong government holds. So it's a series of interlocking levels of confidence in money. The same with gold. People have a certain level of confidence that there's a certain scarcity value. They can be sure, they think that they can get assurance about the actual purity of the gold. So it can have a fungible nature in terms of being a store of value. And I think Bitcoin is confidence, and then it's grown and grown since its founder came up with it. And perhaps Dustin is probably more of an expert than me in the actual origins of Satoshi, who apparently is the person who we don't know who he actually is, who actually came up with this protocol where different nodes will actually confirm each other, so that we have such a level of confidence of different decentralized platforms and nodes confirming to each other the creation of this Bitcoin, that we're absolutely confident in that system. And like we've already heard, there's a finite amount, which we're told, of course, it could fork into something else, but that would become a different kind of Bitcoin, not the original Bitcoin. So we're confident that that is a system which people are beginning more and more and more to see value in. And are they seeing it as an alternative to gold? Well, yes, because it seems like Bitcoin, after it's got over some of all the problems of its forks and its infighting and its regulatory uncertainty, some of these negative factors are around, but they're pretty much gone for the time being, it would seem. And it seems that Bitcoin's decided to focus on this sort of narrower narrative of just being an additional gold that investors can be confident in, rather than a peer-to-peer payment system. And that seems to have picked up a lot of institutional interest. And institutions seem to find this new narrative a lot easier to understand, so it catches on. And like Dustin was just saying, the institutions, they think they need to get allocation to gold because their US dollar holdings are being diminished every year as the US just continues to print more money, so that it makes huge sense to put some allocation into Bitcoin, in which there's increasing levels of confidence.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great start, Julia, with talking about the evolution of Bitcoin, money, defining money, the Federal Reserve, the US dollar. I just love it. Thank you so much for that, Julia. Fabio, because you're an economist as well, where's the money headed to? What's the future of US dollar? And what's the future of Bitcoin? Now, what's money for you, for a 5-year-old right now, if you have to define money? Over to you, Fabio.
Money serves three purposes. It's a means of exchange. It's a reserve of value. Sorry?
I think we have another session open somewhere.
Okay,
That's why we hear ourselves.
So means of exchange, reserve of value, and facilitator of transactions. Now, the Bitcoin is a means of exchange. It's a means of payment, but in terms of reserve of value, has a shortcoming because we don't know 5 months from now what will be the value of the Bitcoin. Now, to give you an example, on 12 March 2020, Bitcoin was worth 4,343 euro. Okay. Yesterday it was worth 22,358 euro. So in a matter of 8 months, it went from 4,000 to over 22,000 euro. Now, imagine if you had taken a loan in Bitcoins, you would be broke. So the main shortcoming of the Bitcoin is the fact that you cannot build a credit system around it, because you wouldn't know what exchange rate would be fair. You can do it for relatively short horizon. In fact, there's a fairly active loan and credit activity for day trading. But the issue here is that for Bitcoin, there isn't an anchor of value. The same applies to some extent for gold. Okay? You cannot be sure that gold tomorrow won't be at, I don't know, $2,500 or at $1,200. Because gold is a commodity, and like all other commodities, its value fluctuates. Now, the advantage, the feature that Bitcoin enthusiasts mention more often is the fact that the stock of Bitcoin will be capped at 21 million pieces. Okay, that's fine. So you will have a finite supply, but this doesn't mean that the value of this asset, which we call Bitcoin, even when all the pieces have been mined, will be stable. So the challenge is to find a cryptocurrency that is linked to some real world good of service, and that can therefore provide a tool for forecasting its value, let's say 10 years down the road. It is true that the central banks have seen their fiat currencies, the dollar, the euro, the pound, decline in real terms. But this decline is controlled, or at least central banks say that they promise they will control this decline in real value and cap it at, let's say, 2%. That's the promise by the European Central Bank. So you are relatively confident, if you trust the European Central Bank, that 10 years down the road, the value of €1 will be, let's say, 20% less than in real terms, vis-a-vis basket of goods and services, 20% less than €1 today. For Bitcoin, you cannot reasonably make an analogous prediction. So that's the what prevents Bitcoin from taking over the fiat currency.
Right.
And it's something that probably with time, this might change.
Right.
With time, there will be an economy revolving exclusively or mostly around Bitcoin. So you pay your employees in Bitcoin, you buy your inputs in Bitcoin, you sell in Bitcoins. So at that point, it can be a consistently credible alternative to the fiat currencies.
Right. Okay. A few things Fabio just mentioned that I'm very curious to know more. Like, you cannot, if you've taken a loan against a Bitcoin, you'd be broke now. Bitcoin is volatile, obviously, as all of us know. But can it be used as a medium of payment? I haven't used Bitcoin as a medium of payment. Many people say that it's a store of value. It's just like gold. We don't use gold as money. We don't literally every day like currencies. So what's the Bitcoin actually is? Is it a gold, a store of value more, or is it going to be a method of payment going forward? And what's the underlying technology of Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin a cryptocurrency? Is it similar to other altcoins that we have? What is it all about? Dustin, would you like to take us through as well for this?
Sure. Yeah, and in regards to what Fabio said too, it's some really good information about not knowing what gold price will be in the future, not knowing what Bitcoin or the US dollar. And just a quick response to that is, speaking of central banks controlling the monetary value in America since 1913, when the central bank was enacted, the dollar has lost over 97% of its value. So even if we can tell how much it's going to lose, at what point do you just say it's not working? It's lost 97% of its value. As for Bitcoin being a store of value, like digital gold, or Bitcoin being a currency, right now, it is definitely volatile. And a lot of people, especially in 2018, they were calling it a bubble because they tend to look at the high prices, right? They see, oh, it went to 20,000. Now it's up to 28,000. Is it going to be another bubble? It's actually fairly systematic. And as a store of value, if you look at the yearly lows, every year they go higher. So if you actually look at the yearly lows, it prints a higher low every single year. So looking at the chart from when Bitcoin was originally formed in 2009, when the first Bitcoin was printed, you can see it has steadily gone up every single year, whereas the US dollar, the euro, every other fiat currency, you can see is steadily declining every year. So as a store of value, yes, if your timeline is at least 1 year or more, it's a great store of value that's actually going to allow you to profit from it. Now, if your timeline, yes, from March to December, you're looking at a swing of 3,000 to 28,000. then yes, you might lose, you might win. And if you take a loan out, you're taking that risk. But if that's a 5-year loan, you have very little to worry about because each year it does go up in value. And that's the store of value scenario.
Right.
As a currency, yes, there's actually a lot of things that determine whether or not you want to use it as a currency. And Julia probably knows a lot about this as well, because it comes down to taxes and your location in the world. In America, if you buy that cup of coffee, they want to tax you in addition for selling your Bitcoin with capital gains. And then you're still paying for the coffee. The other issue is Starbucks actually does accept Bitcoin through BitPay. So you can buy your coffee, but the transaction might take a couple minutes. So people talk about the delay in payment on the Bitcoin network. But again, we have a solution for that, and that's the Lightning Network. So the Lightning Network is much faster. And there are other companies such as BitPay that allow you to go through gift cards. They allow you, companies to set up electronically to accept these payments much faster. In Japan, it's actually very kind of in vogue to go out and use Bitcoin. It's kind of the cool thing. So depending on different countries, it's kind of cool. In America, it's not really beneficial due to tax reasons. Portugal, they actually have no tax on capital gains or anything with Bitcoin. So Portugal, you could spend it at will and not have any tax consequences. So using it as a currency right now is definitely highly dependent on your location. Even in South Korea, you can purchase or rent your beach gear. If you want, floaties or things at the beach in Busan, you can pay with Bitcoin. So it is definitely growing. There are, how many, I have written down somewhere. There's thousands of Bitcoin ATMs around the world now.
Yes.
So
yeah, and Singapore as well.
It's moving that direction. My personal opinion, by 2032, 98% of the Bitcoin will have been mined. So I think by 2032, the price is definitely going to kind of level out. And later, in this decade, you'll be able to spend it and not worry about the fluctuations. You can take bank loans or crypto loans, I guess, backed by your Bitcoin, and you don't need to worry about going bankrupt. So that's coming slowly as it becomes more mainstream, as more institutional investors pile in, which they are definitely doing this year. It's really exciting. So right now, I say it's a store of value. It's working towards a currency. And the second layer, the Lightning, definitely allows you to use it as a currency much easier. So all of these things have solutions. They're being built, they're being implemented, but we're still really early.
Right. Wow, Dustin, I love that. I mean, very great insights. If Bitcoin as a currency, mode of payment, or a store of value like gold. I mean, we have very good insights. South Korea, Portugal, US's own rules and regulations. Let's hear from Julia, because she's obviously represents a law firm. So what about Bitcoin as a mode of payment? Do you see this adoption in Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore? What do you see in the region?
Well, I think that was very much the sort of narrative at the beginning. But like I was mentioning, I do think there's a narrower narrative now about it more being an additional gold. And I think that's certainly why institutions are catching on and find that narrative much easier. But of course, we can talk about individual jurisdictions, and that's absolutely right. And I can tell you a little bit about Hong Kong. But I think that, in fact, I mean, a lot of Bitcoin transactions are actually online. So, I think in an ultimate analysis, you might be able to determine what the jurisdiction of a transaction was, but it might be quite difficult because it would depend where servers are, where the buyer is, where the seller is, where the Bitcoin was transferred, and so on. So the jurisdictional issues are very difficult. And of course, that has been part of the attraction and also the dark side of Bitcoin and other digital currencies, because apart from the sort of loss of control that central banks perceive and governments don't like, there's also a massive issue about money laundering and drug purchases and other perhaps undesirable, allegedly criminal trading to do with trading of virtual assets as value and payment, which can't be tracked back to anybody. And I think the huge push has been FATF has come up with all these standards for virtual asset exchanges, which Hong Kong is actually talking about implementing, but up to now we haven't. So as Dustin alluded to, it really depends where you are. Hong Kong, Bitcoin is completely unregulated. I mean, we have general laws on anti-money laundering, but they don't apply. Doesn't count as a currency, and it doesn't count as a security. So we have many Bitcoin exchanges, and they also trade Ethereum and so on. When they get into other types of crypto, which perhaps go along the spectrum a bit more towards what Hong Kong might determine to be a security, perhaps they step into regulation, but it's completely unregulated here. And there's ATM machines and so on, although it hasn't caught on in the same way, I think, as it has in some places of going into shops and paying by Bitcoin. It's pretty untaxed here. We don't have capital taxes in Hong Kong as well. And in theory, I think Bitcoin profits which are generated in Hong Kong would be taxable, but they're actually very hard to track at the moment. And I'm not sure that the revenue has really got on top of that. I know France, for example, has got some quite sophisticated laws in terms of taxing virtual asset gains. So, I mean, yes, it's definitely going to be used, but in I think probably more as a store of value in the shorter term, and that will give it increasing credibility, which is likely to make it more acceptable as a currency. But conversely, Bitcoin, certainly offerings of Bitcoin exchanges in China, in mainland China, aren't allowed. And the Chinese government is issuing digital RMB, which has already been rolled out in some places on a trial basis. And I think the idea there is that the digital RMB will be able to be paid by mobile phones, in wallets and so on. So that is going to become a very common method of payment, really in quite a short amount of time, I would say within 3 years. But of course, that is just simply a fiat currency which has been digitalized rather than a completely new revolutionary concept, which is this currency of sorts of value, which is outside these government structures to a large extent.
Yeah, I think, Julia, you just mentioned it. I was about to go to CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, which is different from cryptocurrencies, but you just mentioned that. Thank you so much. Fabio, talking about investments into Bitcoin, people do ask me a lot, like, okay, you represent a cryptocurrency exchange, a Bitcoin exchange, a Ethereum exchange. So I would like to invest in Bitcoin. I mean, most of us agree, most of us have shared on this panel that Bitcoin is more like a store of value, just like gold, and not much medium mode of payment yet. It's yet to happen. So talking about taxes, we don't tax, I mean, Hong Kong doesn't tax on digital asset gains and revenues. First of all, is Bitcoin investment, as per you as an economist, what do you think? Is it a good investment for a long-term period, not from a short-term period? And what happens when the government, the regulatory bodies start taxing the revenue gains out of the digital assets like Bitcoin? It's still going to be a very sort of, people are jumping into Bitcoin right now as we speak. Is it going to be still a very lucrative investment? Fabio, over to you.
I don't know if it will be lucrative or not, because I don't have any way to predict the value of Bitcoin in the near or in the distant future. That's my limit, but if somebody knows how make this prediction, I'll be happy to hear it. So you can invest in Bitcoin, hoping that it will be that its value will increase vis-a-vis the fiat currencies. But that's your valuation. It's not something that can be reasonably, in my opinion, backed by a model, an asset pricing model, an exchange rate model, or whatever. This being said, it is, it offers Bitcoin a way to escape the devaluation, the debasement of fiat currencies. So if you think that in the future, due to quantitative easing, due to the massive creation of central bank assets that we've witnessed in the past 12 years, the outcome will be inflation or hyperinflation. Well, Bitcoin offers a safe haven, more or less like gold, but not exactly like gold. So it's what we call as economists, we call an asset whose value is uncorrelated or possibly negatively correlated with the value of normal currencies. The other issue here is regulation, and this is a subtle point. Bitcoin was created to bypass the regulation of the financial sector, so to get around central banks, get around FSA, get around the SEC, and with a hope to develop a self-regulatory environment, like it was, I don't know, in Florence in the 14th century, or was the case in financial centers around the world until the governments came in and imposed regulation. So this part of the Bitcoin project so far hasn't taken hold. So we need to see how the Bitcoin universe and the cryptocurrency in general can establish a self-regulated environment. And those who complain that the central bank doesn't allow this and prevents that, or the authority tax this and that, in my view, miss the point. The challenge of Bitcoin for a libertarian dream is to get rid, be outside all these laws, regulations, impediments, controls that have been imposed on the financial sector, on investors, on the free trade, on the free flow of capital.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Fabio. Sorry, I'm just conscious of the time. So let's talk about some of the news that actually made headlines this year, starting with the very recent controversy about XRP. Many people who know that I work for a cryptocurrency exchange, they came to me and say, oh, we invested in XRP, we bought XRP. Why didn't you tell me not to invest in it? I said, what? How would I know XRP is going to be like, in the news for the bad reason, for the wrong reason, sorry. An exchange is delisting the coin and the price falling by more than 30%. Dustin, before 2020, okay, if somebody asked you to invest in Bitcoin or XRP, what would you advise? And why XRP just came into the limelight being a security and not in the past? Over to you, Dustin.
Okay, this is a really good question. And definitely they hold two completely different ideologies behind them. Bitcoin, obviously, I believe it was kind of created for a little bit different reasons than what Fabio was saying. I think putting money on the internet, the biggest problem was the double spend. So when you send somebody an email, you're literally sending them a copy. You're not actually sending them the original. So to be able to move money across the internet, you needed to send the original money, not a copy. Otherwise, you could double spend it. So Bitcoin solved that problem. And I believe that was a large part of, just moving money onto the internet, digitizing everything. That was part of that background. XRP in the beginning in 2017, it comes out with an ICO, and they pretty much just said, we are working with the banks, while Bitcoin was sort of the anti-bank, right? It was like, no, we don't want to deal with banks. So XRP came out and said, hey, we're going to work with banks. And I thought, well, that's actually pretty good. It would help kind of further the entire crypto sphere if you have one working with the banks. Now, over time, and what brought us to 2020 is they started making many partnerships, and much of the XRP army, hopefully they don't storm my Twitter for saying this, but much of the XRP army, they always talk about the partnerships, and there are many partnerships with banks and XRP. The key component is that, yes, they're good for remittance payments and moving money for a very tiny fee. But the problem is these partnerships that they've partnered with banks, the bank doesn't have to use the XRP token. So Ripple came out, originally the coin was called Ripple. Then they had to separate themselves. They had to say, oh, no, that's XRP. Ripple is a company. So they differentiated the coin from the company. And Ripple, the company, has continued to dump XRP onto retail investors, the XRP army, and they're buying it up. Well, now they're getting sued by the SEC, as we know. And Ripple itself was planning on doing an IPO this year or next.
Right.
So Ripple, in my opinion, is going to come out, and they're going to probably pay some major fines to the SEC. XRP might get dropped because they don't actually need it to accomplish their mission. And Ripple is going to do an IPO and just be a regular business. They're not going to be a cryptocurrency business. They're going to be kind of a software company that allows banks to remit money for a very low fee with their technology. But in my opinion, I think in the next year, we're going to see XRP slowly just continue to kind of fade away, and Ripple is going to continue as a Wall Street company instead of a cryptocurrency company.
Yes, Dustin, I agree. Next question, Julia, because she comes from legal background. What was the main reason of Ripple, XRP from Ripple, getting into troubled waters and SEC running behind them? What was the main reason for that?
Okay, so basically, I mean, the price, as we know, of XRP has been falling because exchanges have been delisting or suspending trading because the SEC brought action, I think, on the 22nd of November against Ripple and two of their senior executives. And that was for allegedly conducting about $1.3 billion US unregistered securities offering under the US Securities Act. And I think they're prosecuting Christian Larson and Bradley Garlinghouse, the current CEO, because they raised capital to finance the company's business beginning in 2013 through the sale of the digital assets XRP. But they were done in unregistered securities offerings to investors in the US and worldwide. And they also distributed billions of XRP in exchange for non-cash considerations such as labor and market making services. And these sales and offers weren't registered. So the SEC is saying they fell outside available exemptions and registrations. And they're alleging that XRP is an investment contract. And they have something which I'm sure you've all heard of in the US securities law called the Howey test. And they say that it's within the Howey test. And so it's a security subject to the registration requirements of the Securities Act. And they've said that they think that the defendants understood and acknowledged in non-public communications that the principal reason for anyone to buy XRP was to speculate on it as an investment. And the SEC think that in publicly offering and selling XRP, Ripple allegedly promised to undertake significant entrepreneurial and managerial efforts, including to create a liquid market for XRP, which would then increase demand for XRP and therefore its price, and therefore it was within the US Securities Act. So it was sold as something quite different, and it was more along the lines of a sort of, these type of sort of offerings back then. They were done in return for services, and there was legal opinions floating around. I haven't actually worked on that particular one, but I've been involved in opinions which talk about having reasonable grounds to having a reasonable basis to form a view that something is simply an exchange for services, almost like a mobile phone contract. You pay for the use of the phone and you get the contract. So it's that time, and you wouldn't say that that was a security, but the SEC is saying, no, hold on a minute, this was a security. And of course, that's massive, because it means that the whole thing has been in breach of US securities law. And as Dustin says, at the very best, they're going to reach a settlement, probably that rather than defend it. So that's the sort of wall that hit, I think, on the 22nd of December.
Very, very, very great points coming from you, Julia. In continuation with that, I'm going to come to Fabio and Dustin as well, the different questions. STOs. We've heard about STOs. We started with ICOs. We then have IEOs, initial exchange offer. Then we have security token offer. So what's the future of STOs? Because I was told it's going to go, it's dead. But do you think it's dead? I mean, just because we are talking about XRP. So I'd just like to hear from you, Julia.
I don't know. STOs are very much something which in Hong Kong we're getting very excited about, because this exchange called OSL, which is just being authorized by the Hong Kong SFC, they're very excited about the STOs they're going to be listing. And they're looking at, there's a number of companies are very interested in doing STOs, and they are tokens which are often linked to assets. So particularly property in Asia, real estate, property are huge. A lot of them are linked to mining pools as well. Mining, say Bitcoin mining pools or mining companies and that type of, that whole space. So STOs, particularly when they relate perhaps to virtual asset activity or other virtual assets, are often a much more diversified and easier to understand way for investors to invest in them. So I think that is, we don't, certainly in Hong Kong, I think we're quite excited about STOs still. We see a way forward with them, both in relation in particular to the property sector and in relation to mining assets.
Absolutely. It's asset-backed tokens, security tokens, and STOs. Yes, thank you so much. Dustin, if you were to advise somebody about investments, would you advise them to invest in Bitcoin, stable coins, CBDCs, or security tokens? And please, if you could explain us the difference as well.
Okay, well, with those choices, I would definitely say Bitcoin. Now, obviously, the stable coins are not truly an investment. They're generally a dollar. They're stable for that reason. The CBDCs, again, those are just governmental run fiat currencies that are being digitized. The STOs actually are quite interesting, and that gets into tokenization of assets. So when you go into a lot of non-accredited investors in America, they don't have that opportunity to buy into an apartment complex or, a condominium. Those investments are generally saved for the accredited investors, and most retail investors just simply can't get into that. So tokenization of contracts for athletes, musicians, condos, apartments, large real estate, that's a whole different world that's opening up, and it really is exciting and fascinating. And it sounds like Hong Kong is kind of really moving forward with that. The reason I would talk about Bitcoin though, and again, talking about the future price, they're actually, if anybody on Twitter follows Plan B, he has the stock to flow model. And Bitcoin through its history has followed the S2F model quite closely. Right. And generally speaking, he projects it out to the end of year 2021. We're looking at about $100,000 per Bitcoin, according to Plan B's stock to flow model, which is easily accessible, on the internet and also Twitter. So even Citibank came out recently, and I don't know how much you know to trust this. They are a bank, but they even came out and they said that we could be looking at 318,000 per Bitcoin by the end of 2021. 318,000. So I don't know where they get that information from. I would definitely say look at Plan B on Twitter at his stock to flow model. And you can see that Bitcoin is closely tracking that model throughout its history. So 100,000 per Bitcoin by the end of year 2021, that's on the table. That is realistic. And so definitely I would tell anybody looking at Bitcoin, look at that model. And in regards as well as to kind of tracking the potential, if you look at the halving, which happens every 4 years, the year after the halving is when you see astronomical rises in price. So after 2012, the halving, 2013, Bitcoin rose 5,286%. The halving in 2016, 1 year after, 2017, Bitcoin rose 1,337%. We just had the halving in 2020. So 2021, even if it rises 500%, is that going to be a failure? Because we're at 28,000 now. Give that a 500,000 or a 500% increase, everybody's happy.
Right.
So we do see these patterns throughout its history that, of course, you can mildly project the future of possibly what it could be. I think on a low end, at the end of 2021, if Bitcoin performed way lower than expected and was only 50,000 per coin, I think most investors would still be happy.
Right. So audience, both Dustin and Julia are bullish on Bitcoin, excited about STOs and tokenization. Let's hear from Fabio about his thoughts. Well, we forgot Libra. Is it a security token or is it a stable coin? Fabio, your thoughts about it.
Libra, it's a sort of stable coin, but I mean, the project, for what I know, has pretty much been a failure because it was a basket of currencies. So it would have been different if Facebook had issued a cryptocurrency which would be worth, I don't know, X advertisement on Facebook. So the value would not have been linked to fiat currencies, but to a service provided by Facebook. Okay, that would have been a game changer. Now, the STO, I'm not sure why people get so excited. Let's assume that I have, I don't know, a skyscraper in London, and I want to tokenize the property of this skyscraper. I could do it through a regular real estate company, and then I sell the shares. If this real estate company is listed on a stock exchange, you can trade the shares like any other company. So in that sense, the STO is not an innovation. It might be an innovation because the tokenization costs less than the listing on a regular stock exchange. The regulatory requirements are lighter, and so on and so forth. But conceptually is not particularly innovative. It would be something different. What I'm working on is something completely different. As I said before, you need to link the value of these cryptocurrencies to something tangible, something that has an intrinsic value. We're doing this experiment. We have a company that produces 3D printers. These 3D printers can produce plastic artifacts, and we're going to put them in, 100, 200, 500 factories. Okay. These 3D printers will be linked so that a factory that needs production capacity can ask its neighbor to use the 3D printer, which this neighbor is not using. So you see, you create a sort of virtual factory linked via internet, where each tool, each 3D printer can be rented, even for a short time. Now, this ecosystem can give rise to a token whose value is, let's say, 1 hour of 3D printer time. Okay? At this point, you have something that is a real alternative to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and is an alternative to gold and fiat currencies, because it's a value, it's linked to something that is worth to a market, a big, hopefully a large market of users. So that, I think, in my view, could be the evolution, or at least one of the evolution of the cryptocurrencies. And in that sense is a stable currency, but not a stable currency linked to fiat currencies, which is a contradiction in terms. It's a stable currency linked to an asset that has actual value in the real world.
Okay, thank you, Fabio. So Fabio doesn't think STOs or tokenization is an innovation. But Dustin, do you like to counter very quickly? We have a few more minutes before we close the show. So no, it's open to for a very interactive discussion. Dustin.
Yeah, two things really quickly. I think tokenization, I think the innovation behind it is actually the possibility to use smart contracts. So when a high rise gains in value, or there's profits to be disseminated amongst the investors who are in that sky rise, it can automatically be done with smart contracts instead of somebody having to do it individually by hand, things in that regard. So I think the smart contracts is really the innovation for dispersing the profits from tokenized assets. Also with the 3D printing, he was kind of sticking to, you need a stable currency. And looking at the time frame, I believe that 5 to 8 years, probably more about 8 years, Bitcoin is going to be less volatile and have a pretty steady price once 98% of it has been mined. So why not start to build that 3D printing network and sharing community and just use Bitcoin, which is the world's most secured computer network, with a huge backing? Why try to reinvent the wheel other than just the price volatility, if that will level out in time?
Absolutely. I mean, yes. I mean, Dustin, great insights. Fabio, you have.
I can answer the question. I can answer that question, because if I use the 3D printer and it costs me 1 Bitcoin per hour, just say, and I pay, say, 1 month from now, and my artifact is sold in euro or in dollar, I don't know if 1 month from now that Bitcoin that I have to pay will make me a profit or a loss. That's why I cannot rely on Bitcoin for this ecosystem of 3D printers.
Well, I think as, if I could chip in, I think as this whole echo space develops, I think there will be hedging. So you could probably lock in your price for the future. And I'm seeing more and more sort of derivatives markets, particularly in the Bitcoin space. The other thing I would like to mention is that we could, sorry, I'm a lawyer and I talk about regulation, but the impact of regulation on price and on sustainability here is just phenomenal. I mean, the whole XRP story that we're talking about is to do with regulatory attacks. And, there's been some commentary, that people have said, well, XRP isn't that different to Bitcoin and Ether. Is this an overall attack on this type of virtual assets? And of course, the first iteration of Libra that sounded such a great idea it appears, anecdotally, it seems to have been really held up because all the various institutions who are going to buy into it and get involved were actually scared off by the regulatory issues involved. And what they've moved to, and as Fabio quite rightly says, it isn't innovative at all, particularly, is a Libra, which is backed by 1-to-1 by a US dollar, which is really something quite different, isn't it? So I think the impact of regulation in this area is massive.
Thank you so much, Julia, adding on to Fabio as well, and Dustin. Great, we've just come to the end of the show. I really wanted to continue, but honestly, this is like 1 hour show, and we are on the last episode, Julia, for the year before we start a new season next year. I would like to now take closing remarks from each of you on the topic about Bitcoin investments, Bitcoin being very bullish and being on in the news for the good reasons. Dustin, what's your closing remarks about the topic today? And what's your feeling and what's your feedback about BCTV?
I'm highly appreciative of you having me on here. It's been an excellent conversation, many diverse ideologies coming from different professions. And honestly, I think today is a perfect example where we hit 28,500 US dollars again for Bitcoin. That's just a preview of what's coming in 2021. And if we are truly to hit that 100,000 mark by the end of the year, Bitcoin would have to rise on average $6,000 per month. That's going to be mind-blowing for a lot of people to see that. And that's just on average. So if we have a $3,000 month, we might have a $9,000 month the next month. So Bitcoin is going to be incredibly exciting. I would love to hopefully, come back on the show next year, see where we're at, see what has developed, and, partake in more of these great discussions.
Absolutely, Dustin. Great insights from you. And I'm definitely going to have you back on my show next year on a new season, a new topic. Julia, over to you. Closing remarks and your...
I totally love being on LATOKEN with you, Sunny, actually, every single time almost. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I've met Fabio before. He's wonderful, grounded, so much academic knowledge and really sees the larger perspective of everything. Great, Fabio. Thank you. And Dustin, your insights and your knowledge are just fantastic. And for me, it's just, isn't it great to talk about something optimistic with everything we've been through in 2020 and the fact we're here and we're optimistic, and it's also interesting to consider new things in the future. And, from a practical standpoint, I can't see that, I can't see Bitcoin not going up. But, even if it retained its existing price, well, compared with other currencies, that might actually be a big achievement as well, given the current uncertainties and climate that we live in at the moment. Yeah. So wishing you all a brilliant 2021.
Thank you so much, Julia. And always to have my pleasure to have you on VCTV. And as from a legal perspective, I get to learn so many things you can't believe. Same goes with the audience as well. And I'd love to have you back on next year. Next season.
Love to come.
Thank you. Fabio, this has been probably after, I think, Gary, you are runner-up in attending VCTV. So what's your closing remarks, and, VCTV best moments, please?
I've been on the show so many times that it's hard for me to point at a particular moment. I had a great time every time I was live, and I enjoyed to hear such a diverse group of people. Julia and Dustin today, but the list can be very long. No, it's important for me to get hints from hints and information, opinion from people which would be difficult to get in touch with in my normal working life. And so having the possibility of connecting to places so distant and sometimes so exotic, because no, we spoke to people from Bangladesh, Cambodia, South America, you know, where how can you reasonably be able to meet these people in normal circumstances? So that, I think, is the biggest value added. And for what concerns Bitcoin, you know, my anarcho-libertarian side, you know, is wants to be optimistic. My realistic side tries to counterbalance the enthusiasm. But I really hope that you know, something which we call decentralized finance will emerge. In order for that to emerge, we need to be aware of the difficulties and not dismiss the hurdles, which are powerful and numerous. So I hope that you know, with the return to normalcy after the pandemic, the decentralized finance might jump one step up and actually bring a credible challenge to the actual global financial architecture.
Excellent. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you for your insights as well. This brings us to the end of the show for the year 2020. One more day before we start move into the new year 2021. I would like to thank each of you, Fabio, Dustin, and Julia, for your time today on spending and sharing insights on VCTV about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, stable coins, and whatnot, and the controversial topics as well. So I would love to have you back on another session, another season of VCTV. We're going to revamp everything for next year. And stay tuned, audience, and stay tuned, investors, speakers, and entrepreneurs. We are having new models for next year as well, which is going to be soon announced by the VCTV team. Till then, stay tuned. And I wish you all, the speakers, the audience of VCTV, everyone watching us today, a very, very happy new year in advance. And having said that, have a great day, great evening, and stay healthy, stay safe. And I'm going to see you back on another episode